Hi, I'm Jim Schlossnagle, head baseball coach at the University of Texas, and this is Lawyers and Longhorns.
Coach Kurt Arnold, thank you for coming down.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Coach Jason Itkin,
Hey,
good
Jason,
seeing
good
you.
to see you.
How are you?
Honored to be here. It's great. Fired up.
Honored to have you.
Yeah.
You've been at UT now for one season. How's it been?
I feel like we have the program going in a really good spot. Love our recruiting class, love our returning players. Super excited to be a Longhorn.
How do you like Austin so far?
Love it. As I tell our recruits, you can lead any kind of lifestyle you want here. You know, if you're a country guy and you want to get out away from town, you can do that simply. I've really enjoyed it.
Coach, you've been UNLV, TCU, another school. Everywhere you've gone, you have won and won quickly. There's got to be something that you bring, whether it's, I don't know if it's philosophy, work ethic.
Every place I've gone, I've gotten lucky where the previous coach, there were some good players left over. You know, there were some good guys like for our team this past year, Rylan Galvan, Jalen Flores, Max Ballou, Luke Harrison, Will Gasparino, a lot of really good players. The thing that we kind of pride ourselves on is just culture. And that sounds like a coachy thing these days, but it really is. You know, you are what you repeatedly do. And we have a system to everything that we do. We have a process, whether that be me hiring coaches, which is really the most important decision I make, and then getting the right players, and then on a daily basis, instilling, maintaining, growing, building, adjusting with a culture that provides an opportunity for young people to get better. And if you just stick to that, it's nothing probably the same in your business. There's no quick fix. It's truly just the consistency over time of doing the right things and adjusting behavior, then the results should speak for themselves.
So you said the most important thing is coaching hires. Just kind of walk me through the basics of how many coaches do you have, or do we have analysts? Or
Luckily, Chris Del Conte gives us the resources to have as about a full staff as we can possibly have within reason. We have 4 coaches, including myself, that are permitted to coach on the field. We'll have a director of baseball operations. We'll have a player development guy, obviously strength and conditioning, athletic trainer. We spend a lot of time, effort, and money in the mental game of baseball, the psychology of baseball, what I would call peak performance coach. That's kind of a consultant for us. And then we do have an analytics team that allow us to have the very best system to recruit players, because we just don't want to recruit anybody. We want to recruit guys that fit what we do or what we think are valuable. And then when they get here, have a system to develop them. So I would say our staff's probably between 8 and 10 full-time people.
And what's the full roster count, both scholarship and walk-ons?
By December 1st, our roster has to be cut to 34. Last year, we had roughly 40 players. 40 is what we were allowed to have. There's some nuances with the new rules where you're allowed to grandfather anybody who the coach would have deemed getting cut because the roster went from 40 to 34. Those players can, quote unquote, be grandfathered in
For a year or two? Or
for the entirety of the rest of their career.
Okay.
And so we have some guys on the team that they have tremendous value. Ethan Walker, a sidewind and walk-on junior college lefty that ended up starting game 1 of the SEC tournament. It would have been tough to keep him on a 34-man roster, but we can keep him now. So this year, our roster may be closer to 38 or 40. As those guys go through the system at all universities, it will eventually shrink to 34 players.
So when you're looking at your roster, now that we have NIL and it's here, whether you like it or don't like it, it's here to stay. But talk to us a little bit about kind of the calculus. If you're an 18-year-old student athlete or 20-year-old student athlete that gets drafted, what's the process and how can NIL sort of help in the development of that student athlete?
Well, the first thing is what NIL did when it first came around for our sport is baseball has always been the most under scholarship sport in all of college athletics. We only had 11 and a half scholarships for 40 guys. Most of NIL was bridging the gap between the 40% scholarship that you got and the rest of the cost of school. That's still the case at most places. And even in our place, if a young man earns, let's say he's out of state and he's on 50% of a baseball scholarship and he's able to earn, I don't know, $50,000 of NIL money, well then that money is just going to pay for his school. You know, it's not like he's throwing $1 million in his pocket or something like that. And so certainly as that's grown, the numbers have grown a little bit. It does help guys legitimize turning down the draft. I think the biggest thing NIL does for college baseball is it helps us retain players, right? So we were able to have some of our best returning pitchers come back to school. Guys that were going to be drafted maybe the 8th to the 12th round, signing bonus somewhere $100,000 to $250,000. Well, hey man, why don't you come back to school, graduate, go ahead and get that Texas degree through the rules. We'll be able to put together a package that kind of makes you feel better about that decision from a financial standpoint. And then we recruit our own players, and you have Longhorns instead of going out and just always grabbing other players. The kids that are 18 that are going super high in the draft, that's a completely different conversation. We're certainly not going to be able to match, a $7 million signing bonus, and you're going to lose those guys. But NIL is one thing, but having a kid have the foresight, and his parents have the foresight to see that the fastest route to the major leagues for most players is through college baseball. But that's a delayed gratification thing, right? You have to say no to something on one end and understand that there's a process to get you to the big leagues, which is a completely different conversation, but certainly one I'm real passionate about because we want the best players, and hopefully we'll be able to retain those guys.
So give me kind of the buckets of recruiting and putting together your roster versus like high school players, JUCO guys, which I guess would be transfer portal, Puerto Rico or Cuba or, Latin American countries. Like, how do you manage all that? It seems like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And that's why Nolan Kane, our recruiting coordinator, is the best that I've ever worked around. I hired him from LSU to go with me to A&M, and then I certainly wanted to bring him here. One of the biggest issues in our sport is transfer portal opens June 1st, roughly, and the Major League Draft is until the middle of July. The draft used to be in June, right? Imagine if the draft has already taken place. Well, we would already know who's leaving our team, who in our recruiting class is not going to show up. Now we have a month to use the portal to fill that roster. Well, that's not the case. The portal is wide open. The draft is until the middle of July, and we have to have some educated guess on who's coming, who may come back, who's in the portal that's draft eligible. We may get them committed and signed, and then they get drafted and they never even show up, right? So it is a complete nightmare. But the main buckets, to answer your question, are the high school players and then the transfer portal.
My high school, I had two pitchers that skipped college, first round picks. I don't remember how much they got paid. Maybe it's a couple $1 million, something like that. Of course, I'm a little older, so maybe they're paying a lot more these days. And they didn't play in the league for more than 2 years. When you sit down with the mom or the high school kid, well, what's the conversation?
Yeah, this will take up the whole show. I have a 45-page PowerPoint on this deal, and you can look at it from a academic perspective. What is the best for the next 40 to 50 years of my adult life? That's one conversation. What is life-changing money, right? Someone says, well, if I get $1 million, well, it's not $1 million over the course of, that's just a signing bonus, right? That's what you get on the front end. Everybody gets paid the same in the minor leagues, minus a thing called taxes, right?
Sure.
That money's not changing your life over the course of the next 40 years like a Texas degree will. But if you just look at it from a pure baseball perspective, what I try to ask them to do is remove emotion from it. Would you ever let your child go into a occupation that has a 98% chance that you'll never reach the top of the profession, nor will you stay there for more than 2 years? Would you ever let your daughter do that? Well, of course not. Well, then why do you let your son do it? Because it's baseball. Because it's all little Johnny has ever wanted to do. So we try to remove the emotion and say, listen, here are the facts. The fastest route to the major leagues is through college baseball, even if you're a first-round pick, right? And it's not just make it to the big leagues, it's stay in the big leagues. So the minimum salary now in the big leagues is about $700,000,
Okay.
which you get taxed as an entertainer in every city you play.
And we're not talking about minor leagues, right?
This is the big leagues. In the minor leagues, in A, it's gotten better, but in A ball, they might make, $1,500, $2,000 a month. And you only get paid for the months in which you play. You don't get paid during spring training, right? So the money that you get as this bonus it's not a bonus. It's an advance on salary. So a high school right-handed pitcher, the average time in the major leagues is roughly 6 years if you make it. Well, you have to take that $1 million minus the taxes, and that's what you're living on.
Right.
And then they don't have a degree.
And no one goes back to school. They'll say, hey, we'll give you the bonus and we'll pay for your college when you go back. But they don't project out the cost of the school 7 years later. It's just that dollar value in the moment. And so in my mind, it's a losing proposition. There certainly is a 2% that make it to the big leagues and have this great career. But being a college player increases your chances infinitely to get to the big leagues and, more importantly, get past what they call arbitration, get to a second contract where you really make money. That's where the best college players
What are some of the things that you're hoping to impart to the young men that you're coaching, whether they leave after a year, 2 years, or 4 years and get a degree and, never play professional baseball?
Well, first of all, I've been
Never-
coaching for 35 years, and obviously there's probably 20 times as many players that I've coached that haven't made the major leagues
Sure.
than have. And so I didn't play a day of professional baseball. I've never been in professional baseball. I certainly have respect for that. But I feel like I'm in the character and leadership development business through the sport of baseball. And so, whether it be all of the lessons that we could stand here and talk about forever, that athletics and adversity and challenges and overcoming all that, all those things that you learn, whether you're an athlete or not in college, but certainly as an athlete at a place like this, you learn how to navigate through the challenges of life. And then you're a productive member of society. The goal is to be a great husband, a great dad, and a great teammate in whatever you choose to do. So those are the life lessons that, my goal is to teach through the sport of baseball.
We've gotten to talk to some of the other coaches, and it seems that you hear those same things. It's not just competing for national championships in the sport, but coaches that really care about student athletes.
Yeah, I think don't get me wrong. Chris likes the athletic director's cup as well, and we all do.
He might check the standings 3 or 4 times a day.
3 or 4 times an hour. Yeah. And that's awesome. Obviously, I have a history with Chris from TCU, and that's his competition. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's great. And he pushes all of us. We all push each other to be the very best. But I think what's unique about Texas relative to the places I've been, when I was at TCU, 9,000 students, smaller, a lot of interaction between coaches. When you get to a bigger school, that's really hard to do. Sheer size, competitiveness, you can be super siloed. Sark could stay here, stay in his ivory tower, and never go hang out with anybody else. But he doesn't. And we just had a head coaches retreat a week and a half ago. And what Chris has done is created a culture, not just in the athletic department, but among the coaches. And we have a group text that goes on and on and on with our head coaches. And so that's something that you really feel here. I'm sure you guys in your profession, there's 90% of the stuff that goes on you can talk to people about, but there's probably only 10% of the things that maybe only you guys can talk about. And as a head coach at a place like Texas, there's some of the things that Sark or Coach Bowman or Coach Miller, like they would understand it. I can really only talk to them about it. But if you don't have an avenue by which to get together, then you feel like you're all alone, and you feel like you're in this silo, and it's just about winning and losing. And that's no fun. That's not my purpose in life. I want to win worse than anybody. But if you were to ask me my purpose, it's to help drive young people to be better. And this place has a culture unlike anything I've been around. Everywhere I've been, the culture among the head coaches is not just dictated by the athletic director, it's dictated by the attitude of the head football coach. If the head football coach is kind of elitist and wants to be off on his own, I don't care about anything else, my job is to win football games, that actually flows into the rest of the coaches. But when you have a guy like Sark who returns a text, or a couple weeks ago, we had 2 massive transfer portal recruits in. The first time since I've been here, I asked Sark to kind of get involved and maybe just let us go out to watch the football guys work out since Jonah was out there. He met us at the door. I stepped aside. Sark gave the tour of the football facility, took the kids out on the field, and that was amazing.
You and Sark are coaching one of the same athletes.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Amazing, obviously. Jonah's a special human being, and I think the reason he had success for us in baseball is because, and I know he's going to do great in football, is because Sark was a baseball guy first. He was a baseball guy at USC and then went to junior college to play football and baseball and then went on with the football thing. And so in 35 years as a coach, I've had plenty of football and baseball players. How they do is dictated by what does the football coach need from them, and is their mind pulled in different directions all the time? Right? And so Jonah had a great year for us because when I came over here before spring practice to see Sark, and I said, hey man, we're getting close to spring practice. When do you need Jonah? Like, tell me what the schedule is, because it's certainly going to be dictated by football. Mm-hmm. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, do you want him at practice? We have to fly him back and forth to games. He's a baseball player. Tell him to come see me when baseball season's over.
That's awesome.
And that's tough because that's the best.
That doesn't happen very often.
Well, it doesn't happen anywhere. And the best safety in the country, the best safety in his class to do that. Jonah would go over and watch practice on our off days because we have to follow the rules too on how much time he can invest in sports. But Jonah had a clear mind. Jonah, as far as I know, didn't have even the position coach in his ear about, hey, you better get over here and at least watch, or hey, I see you're not playing in baseball. You better get over here. And Jonah didn't really play the first 2.5 months of the season, didn't even make our first road trip. He had success. Obviously, he's talented, but he had success because he had a clear mind. He was all in on baseball until our season ended, and now he's all in on football.
When you're designing the strength and conditioning side of things, does he need a slightly different program than you'd otherwise have him in because of football and baseball?
Sure, yeah. Some of that's dictated by the position that he plays. If he actually was a pitcher as well in high school, and I've seen him pitch up to 94 miles an hour, but we're probably not going to have him do that at Texas. He was hurt when he first got here, and he lifted with us, our strength coach and the football strength coach. They communicated on some things, but certainly the bigger and stronger he gets as a football player is only going to help him from a baseball standpoint. Yeah.
There might be a couple dads watching this that they think their kids could grow up and be a great athlete. Would you have them specialize, or would you have them play as many different sports as possible? Yeah.
Play all of them as long as you possibly can for a lot of reasons. Number one, it makes you a better athlete. And number two, I'm a big believer that there's a thing up here, I think it might be right above us. It's called a scoreboard, right? And there's so many, especially in our sport, youth baseball, they play a lot of games that don't mean anything. You got to play to win. We want winning players, right? I would much rather have a guy like Jonah competing in a Friday night football game in high school than playing some Saturday afternoon doubleheader in the fall baseball game that no one's paying attention. It's just another game, right? And there's something to that. There's something to repetition. But I would rather have a competitive athlete that's competing in each sport. And then the third one is, and I think this is probably the most important, is your son may not always be the best in each sport. Let's say he's a great baseball player, but he's not the best football player. He's on the team, but he's playing. Well, that's a life lesson you're learning. How to be a great teammate, how to be second string, how to learn I got to fight for my position versus, oh, if I'm not going to play every day in football, then I'm just going to go play baseball. Well, that you're running away from adversity, right? And so a lot of times we'll recruit kids in baseball and they're going into their junior year and they're football players and they'll say, Coach, I really want to come to Texas. Do you think I should focus on baseball and not get hurt maybe in playing football? I was like, no, you should play football, man. Play football as long as you can because there's going to come plenty of days where you don't ever get to do that again. Yeah. So me in particular, I'm for all the sports.
What's it maybe like for you as someone who's known legends in the sport? You're going to be in that Mount Rushmore of coaches, and you've got also younger coaches that you're developing. And so how do you manage that? There's maybe someone on your staff right now who 20 years from now, you want to see them break your records or something like that.
Yeah. First of all, I don't think about records or anything like that. I truly don't think about that stuff. Being the head baseball coach at Texas, in my opinion, it's the best spot to be in our sport. If you were to come to my office, there's a mural on the wall and it has Coach Dish, Coach Falk, Coach Gus, and Coach Garrido, and they stare at me every day.
That's awesome.
So in case you don't know what the standard is, it's right there staring me in the face every single day. And I'm not afraid of that. I've loved everywhere I've coached. I truly have, even the last one. And I loved it. I loved it all. But at the same time, this is the mountaintop. And I understand the expectations that come with it. And that's fine. I'm not afraid of that. I've worked my entire life to be prepared for this. That part of it I don't think about. The winning and players hopefully will take care of that. And we can get at least one more national title here soon. And then with my current coaches, I think I've had 8 or 9 former assistants be head coaches. I don't say it's necessarily anything because of me, but it's because I'm not afraid to hire good people, right? And, I'm actually not afraid to lose good people because I think—
It's like your coaching tree.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like when the team goals are met, the individual goals get met, right? You don't see players high draft picks off of bad teams normally, right? When the team goals are met, the players get drafted. The head coach gets a new contract. The assistant coaches get head coaching jobs, right? And so I think if we all are driven towards the team goals, then a Nolan Kane, who's awesome, Max Weiner, our pitching coach, who's amazing, Troy Tulowitzki, I'm sure at some point those guys may want to be head coaches or do something else. And when that happens, great, awesome. That just allows us to go hire the next best one because I think people see when you come and work in our system and we win and we're all focused on a team goal, then it works out for everybody. So those are things that I don't consciously think about, but we've proven that our processes work.
What's more important, pitching or hitting?
Pitching, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, pitching.
In a game time scenario, how much of the signals are you giving versus your assistant coaches versus trusting your players?
On the pitching side, Max Weiner calls all the pitches.
Okay.
The pitchers can shake off if they want. They trust him a lot, and that goes through the pitch comm, like you'll see it on TV, like you see it in major leagues. There's a little thing in their hat that they can hear what pitch to call, or if we have a pickoff play on, something like that. We kind of preset the defense. The guys out in the field have a little card that we've said, hey, when this guy comes up, you're going to stand here.
He hits to the left or whatever.
Yeah, and so it has it set on their card. And then the rest of it's on the players. And you certainly want to give the players some freedom so that when they get into professional baseball, they can do those things on their own, because that's not as dictated in professional baseball. Now, in offense, I run the offense. So if you're watching the game and you see me standing on the top step of the dugout, I'm giving signs to tell us whether we're doing anything or not. But within that, there's some freedom.
And so how many of the signs are real and how many are?
90% of the time that I'm doing something, nothing's going on. And we've actually, in college baseball, you're allowed now to use the pitch comm or the electronic communication, but we voted in the SEC that you can't do it because there was so much, I don't want to say cheating, but there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, relaying pitches through
People hacking the
hacking the system. Yeah, there's different things. So, for instance, when we played, I think it was UTSA or somebody in the regional, a lot of teams that we play outside of our league, they're not giving signs, they're just listening. Whereas within our league, you still have to be the old-fashioned way of actually giving signs.
How much of it's driven by analytics versus sort of just a feel like, hey, this guy's feeling it?
Analytics is certainly a part of it, and just gives me information, or gives Max information.
Right.
And then you have to take your own instinctual, hey, I've been sitting here in this spot for 35 years. What do I feel in this moment? Where's the player? Like, where's the player mentally? Where's the player physically? There are so many things that are going on during the course of a game that I can't tell the media, or I can't tell a fan. Only me and the player know that
Maybe he's sick or
he's sick,
Fighting with his girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah, there's, I mean, the mental state that he's in, you can't talk about that in the media, and the fans are like, why aren't you bringing this? Why aren't you doing this? If I could tell you, then you'd understand.
Yeah.
But you just don't know, and that's okay. But it's the analytics are definitely a part of it.
I think you said earlier that you've got a performance coach. Do you find that helps?
That's the secret sauce of our program.
Yeah.
And it starts off with, you cannot be in control of your performance unless you're in control of yourself. We've all been around great athletes that are awesome before the game starts. And then when the game starts, in baseball, they call that a 5 o'clock hitter. Guy's awesome at 5 o'clock, game's at 7, man. Right? And we've also been around guys that aren't that awesome in practice. But when the lights come on, Jonah Williams, some of the balls you saw him hit, or the at-bats he had, he actually didn't have those that often in our practices. But when the lights came on, whew, baby, competitive intelligence, competitive spirit, man, and that's where the football helps them. The mental game's huge for us, and it's basically creating mental skills that can be practiced every single day to allow you to stay in the moment. One of our sayings is, if it happened a second ago, it happened a million years ago.
I like that.
Right? And so if you're hitting and the guy throws a pitch and it's 2 balls off the plate and the umpire calls it for a strike, well, if you react, you're certainly going to react for a second, but you have to have a mental process and a physical process to release that, get back in the moment, normally with a big deep breath that slows down your heart rate physiologically and clears your mind. Now we're on to the next pitch. Why does that last pitch have to affect this pitch?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I've always thought baseball was probably the mental aspect that might be the hardest. Because when you're playing basketball, it just you're moving, and
our game, especially as a hitter, even as a pitcher, but especially as a hitter, it's built on your ability to handle failure.
Yeah.
Because if you guys are only successful 30% of your time in your business, how's that going to turn out?
Yeah.
As a baseball player, they send you to the Hall of Fame for that.
yeah.
And so you can hit the ball hard right at the shortstop, out. Did you fail? You didn't fail. You controlled everything you possibly could. You weren't lucky. You could also take the world's worst swing, dribble one down the third baseline, and you get a base hit, and everybody cheers. Well, you have to take the good with the bad as a baseball player, and there's a process to learn how to do that.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate you coming.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being at the
Coach,
University of
awesome.
Texas.
Appreciate it.
And we appreciate all that you do.
Honored to be here.
Yeah.
Hook 'em.